Welcome back, everyone, to another After Action Report. It's me, Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about my most recent experiences at the USA Charity Cup. Before I go too far, I do want to give a big shout out to Green Banner Event Company, hosted by Stephen Corrales, Jason McKenzie, and Anthony Cohen, I believe his name is. And Kicker Kolosny, a lot of fantastic people who I got to hang out with and got to go see at the USA Charity Cup. They've been doing events most recently in the southwestern United States. So in SoCal, I believe they do some stuff in Utah as well, but they also have been doing this event, or they just started this event just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. So they've been doing a lot of really cool stuff in the area, and I thoroughly enjoy every single one of their events that I've been to so far. They do a lot of good work, and so I know if you're interested in checking out their website for all the cool stuff in terms of their local leagues throughout the southwestern United States, as well as their TTS league, I can say nothing but good things about this organization. So, a touch of background about this event. The USA Charity Cup is a benefit event that was created to help the U.S. Wargame Federation's endeavors to help support Team USA and Wargaming the United States as a whole. And in this one particular, from what I understand, a lot of the proceeds were going towards the U.S. Wargames Federation, which is the body that organizes Team USA and helps to support the people that we are sending across the Atlantic in order to go play at WTC. So a lot of people were coming at this one. It was a very strong event. There were people coming over from all across the western half of the United States. And of course, a bunch of local players were coming out as well. So people were coming from SoCal. I know some people are coming from Texas, some people coming up from Washington. There are people coming over from all over the place. And it was really cool getting to meet everybody who was involved. For a little bit of help in understanding how strong this event actually was, you can take a look at the average elo of people coming out to this. We had an average elo of over 1,600, meaning that the average player at this event was already going to be in the top 5% of players globally. Several people involved were directly involved with Team USA in terms of playing for the Team USA Academy, trying to fight for their spot to actually play at the WTC, and several other people were also involved in terms of being coaches and helping to support the team in general. So let's go ahead and talk about the list that I actually brought to this event. I was playing 2 Cadian command squads, 1 Ogryn Bodyguard with a Bulgrin Maul and a Brute Shield, a Rogal Dorn Tank Commander with the Grand Strategist enhancement, Ursula Creed, 1 unit of 20 Cadian Shock Troops that was always attached to Ursula Creed and a Cadian command squad, 2 units of 10 Catachan Jungle Fighters, 1 unit of 20 Death Korps of Krieg, 2 individual Tauroxes, 1 Hellhound with a multi-melta, 1 Leman-Russ Battle Tank with melta+lascannon, 1 LR Exterminator with plasma cannons and lascannon, 3 LR Vanquishers, 2 of which had triple heavy flamer, 1 of which had multi-melta+lascannon, and then a Scout Sentinel with a lascannon. And when I was building this list, the main thing that I was building in mind was, one, I wanted to have the tools necessary to be able to kind of fight everything. I was very inspired listening to Zach Como and talking about how he wanted to bring enough tanks that Mordaka was not going to be able to kill all of them. They would be able to kill some of them for sure, but you won't be able to kill everything. The next part was that it was just going to be very, very violent, right? I had a lot of damage coming out of this list. I had a total of 7 vehicles that were toughness 10 or higher with a 2+. So a Hellhound, 5 Leman Russes, and a Rogal Dorn meant that I had enough firepower to really fight just about anything in the game. And it was supplemented by a couple of pieces that were just annoying to remove. The Cadian Command Squad with the Ogryn Bodyguard is very tough to remove. A lot of armies are going to struggle to remove a unit of Death Korps of Krieg. And then the Tauroxes with Catachan inside are not trivial to remove, so you are going to have to use a little bit of your tools to get rid of them, but they're also just very fast OC, such that I can do action, such that I can deny primary as I need to. So for my first round of this event, I ended up playing up against one of the strongest players at the event, his name being Kit Smith Hanna. Kit had come out from Texas for this event, and he was playing, from what I understand, just a copy-paste of Tim Schneider's most recent list that he's been having a lot of success with Votann over in Germany. But to go over it, it was a Brokir Iron Master, an Einherjar Champion. The Iron Master had the Appraising Glare, so you pick an objective and you get bonus judgment tokens against anything on it. 2 units of 10 warriors that he split into smaller units with Sagittars. 3 of those Sagittars that we talked about. 2 units of 10 Chthonian Berserks. 2 Hecaton Land Fortresses. And then 2 units of 6 Hernken Pioneers and 1 unit of 10 Hernken Jaegers. Overall, a fairly lean list where all the Berserks are actually a pretty big threat because of the fact that they are a bunch of attacks at 923 that can fight on death. Now, the fight on death wasn't really worrying to me, but for a lot of other armies, that is a pretty big deal. And they are not trivial to remove because they're still toughness 5 with a 5 or 6 up normal save and then a 5 up Feel No Pain, meaning that sometimes you just don't die in ways that a lot of people are expecting you to. Kit had driven over to this event alongside Ben Jurek, who was who in many ways was the founder of the event. And apparently they had also talked about a very similar matchup of the Guard versus Votann, where a lot of it comes down to who's going to be making more saves during the course of the game. So all the missions at this event were custom missions, and this one that I played up against Kit was Search and Destroy, Swift Action, and Scorched Earth. Now, there were a couple of small differences about the terrain from what we see here as to what we actually played. So I made a couple of small adjustments to the screen so you can see that the terrain that we were playing with wasn't an exact match for the Pariah Nexus recommended. The 10x5 pieces on the sides, we ended up having the walls go nearly all the way to the end instead of going only about 2/3 the way through the terrain piece. And also the U's that we had for these two big pieces in the middle were a little bit larger. And this was a pretty big deal because it meant that I could put a Krieger or a Cadian command squad or something on this side of the wall and res them to be actually on the point. Honestly, this game went pretty similarly to the way that I kind of expected it to, which was I was going to try and hold this, he was going to try and hold this one, and we would kind of go back and forth, but realistically, you're going to be scoring 5 points of primary most turns. A big part of this is this distance to here and this distance to here are just short, right? You have very easy ways to get from one side of the wall to the other, and so it becomes very easy to do primary denial, especially on this map and mission. And ultimately, this game felt pretty close for the most part until we got to, because on turn 2, he goes for one of his big shooting turns and just completely whiffs. And then I go for my turn 2 and go for one of my big shooting turns, and I also just completely whiff. But the problem is, on his turn 3, Kit kind of whiffs again. And it leaves like one land fort here, another land fort around here, a big clump of berserks somewhere in here, unit of bikes, like some warriors. And the question really just becomes, can I kill all of this? I need to kill pretty much everything all at once. In order to do this, I had about a Rogal Dorn. I think I had an Exterminator and like a Vanquisher, something like this. And I think I had another Vanquisher and like a battle tank somewhere in here. And my stretch goal was I was going to try and kill this land fort, and then most of this. And if I killed all of that, then I would be able to put like a little bit of damage downrange at these bikes. And then I just started shooting, and this just died. And then this just also died. And then he didn't make like a single field no pin on the berserks. And so I got to kill like most of the bikes, I think, as well. And so suddenly, as we go into top of 4, Kit just doesn't have anything left on the board. He has, like, the Iron Master is over here. He's got some warriors, I think, that are, like, hiding out behind here. He's got, like, a couple of the bikes that are hanging out over here. But he no longer has the tools to ever threaten my vehicles again. And so for turns 4 and 5, we kind of just played it out pretty quickly, moved a couple of models around, and realized that he was never going to be able to stop me from controlling primary for the rest of the game. And so I can see how this Tim Schneider list is very powerful a lot of the time. The problem is if it runs into a lot of T10 2+ vehicles where the Sagittars and the Hecatons with the whatever crit outside of 12 inches guns, they just don't have the consistency to actually take down some of these vehicles. And it ends up being a bit of a crapshoot as to like how much damage you're actually going to be doing. But overall, I think in many ways this game was determined by the fact that I was going second, so I was already going in it with a little bit of a primary advantage, and Kit just didn't make his rolls. He wasn't killing, he wasn't saving very often, and it meant that I was killing more than I was supposed to, especially on this turn 3, which is where the game just completely broke open. That said, Kit was still a gem. I really enjoyed playing that game up against him, and hopefully we get to play again someday. My next round, I ended up playing up against Kyle Trinidad and his Aeldari Windrider host, and I'll be honest, I didn't really know what Windrider host did. Turns out they're kind of like Hypercrypt Necrons, where you just like pick bikes up over and over again. But going over his list, he had Eldrad, a Farseer Skyrunner with, I don't know what this is, Lycus, 3 units of 6 Windriders. He told me that like 2 of them had like sustained guns, so these are like heavy bolters, and apparently this is a lethal's gun. I'm not really sure. 2 units of Fire Prisms, 1 unit of Rangers, 2 units of 3 Shining Spears, 2 units of 3 Shroud Runners, 2 units of Warwalkers, 3 individual Warlock Skyrunners, and a Warp Spiders. And so basically what the main combo from this that I understand is Lycus will shoot at something, give your army sustain or crit 5s against it, and then you just absolutely blow it up with Wind Riders because you can get access to, I think Shroud Runners give you ignores cover, and Warwalkers give you bonus AP. And so all of this together just means that these units just will kill almost anything that you are allowed to do the combo to. Kyle and I played this one on Crucible of Battle with Hidden Supplies and Purge the Foe. And Hidden Supplies meant that we had our extra objectives something like this instead of the one in the middle here. And this game ended up being a bit of a wonky one. Based on all of my understanding of actually looking at this map before we got to the table, this is one where you get to shoot your opponent, right? It's very hard for your opponent to completely hide. There's some small areas here. You have like your castle where you can hide, and then if you have the time to move like into here, you can hide, and you can hide something here. But notice that a lot of this is not in your deployment zone, and the stuff that is in your deployment zone is so far back that if you're staged up there, if you're spending a lot of time there, you're not doing anything on the board. So when I went first, I noticed that Kyle had put one of his units of Wind Riders, this one with lethal hits, from my understanding, was somewhere in here. And one of the things that I had talked about, one of the stratagems that I had not used in my practice games at all, is I believe it's called coordinated action, where 1 CP at the start of a phase, you say that this unit and this unit are sharing orders. And one of the most common ways that you do this is you give a tank move, 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 or you give the tank take aim, and then you order the other thing move, move, move. You can either do it in the movement phase to get the bonus movement, or you can do it in the shooting phase in order to trade over the take aim. I did it where I ordered the tank move, 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 and then shared take aim to it later. It doesn't really matter which way you do it, but anyway, that's the way they did it. I had a Rogal Dorn, my Rogal Dorn commander, somewhere in like here, and by giving it move, 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 we determined that when I move here, like touching the objective, and we determined that with a 13-inch move, I could move my Rogal Dorn somewhere such that it was going to be able to shoot downrange at these Wind Riders. And so when I did that, I also had my unit of Krieg that I think they just moved up to, they were just hanging out on this objective, something like that, but I made sure that they could see each other. And I used the Rogal Dorn, the long-range gun, so it was like some stubber shots, the main gun, and the autocannon, and I killed about half of this unit. I think I killed like 4 or 5 bikes out of this unit, which is a huge deal in terms of like cutting its ability to actually do any damage to things. And one of the main reasons why I was willing to do this was, one, I knew that it wasn't the only threat on his side of the board to doing damage to my vehicles, but it was one of the ones that was the most consistent because of the volume that it was putting out. I wasn't super worried about the Warwalkers, and the Fire Prisms, I knew that I'm just not going to be able to hide from Fire Prisms, because he only needs to ever show one of them at a time, and he can basically draw a line of sight to pretty much anything on my side of the board if he wants to. He's going to be able to shoot any of my vehicles at any time, which is why I was willing to put the Rogal Dorn this far out in the open right at the beginning. And so that went pretty well for me. But the second problem comes up on the bottom of one when Kyle actually brings in another one of his bike units. And he spent like 1 CP in order to 6-inch deep strike it, and he put the unit of bikes like something in here. And I overwatched them, and I killed like 5 bikes again on the overwatch. So I had killed like 4 or 5 bikes out of this unit on my first turn with the Rogal Dorn, and then I killed like 4 or 5 bikes out of this unit when it comes in, and suddenly Kyle is just reeling because I've killed 2 of his main like damage dealing pieces, 2 of his main pieces that he can use to actually play around the board, 2 of the pieces that he can pick up and play and kind of do whatever he wants with, and now these units are not going to be able to threaten any of my vehicles basically ever. And you could tell that Kyle's confidence of the game had eroded very quickly in this game, especially after the Overwatch comes through. And it actually meant, because he had to bring out like Warwalker, and then like a Fire Prism ended up coming into here, and he just had to bring out a lot of units very quickly in order to continue playing the game. But one of the things that Kyle also did, I think that put him really on the back foot once he could no longer he didn't really have the tools to kill the number of vehicles that I was playing at this point. But I think one of the major spots that actually put Kyle on the back foot was that Krieg unit that I said was like hanging out in here, just on this objective. Kyle had Lycus and his warp spiders basically hanging out behind this ruin, and 24 inches gets them to somewhere in here, is what I remember. But one of the things that Kyle did is he drew Cole the Horde in the bottom of 1. Kyle did not score Cole the Horde until bottom of 3. So he ended up holding on to a dead secondary for turn 1, and he held on to it again for turn 2, and then he only finally scored it on the 3rd turn, which is just way too late in the game for the secondary. Because the other thing that he had to do was he threw Lycus and the Warp Spiders at it, and remember, a big part of this unit is trying to paint a target such that you get the crit 5s against it. But he didn't really get a lot of value out of that because he ended up using it to try and get Call the Horde, and Lycus and Warp Spiders didn't kill that unit. Eventually, he very quickly got to a spot where I had collapsed this flank. I had taken control of this. I had taken control of this. I could maybe have like taken a bit more control of this, but Kyle really only had units in and around his castle. And so the game very quickly was kind of over. We both saw the writing on the wall, especially since I got multiple kill more turns in a row. But I think Kyle mostly just underestimated how quickly I could move this way and actually draw that line of sight towards the bikes. And also, it was just holding on to the secondaries for too long. That said, it was a fun game. I enjoyed talking to him, and we got to talk a little bit about like doing podcasts and stuff afterwards. So I hope he's doing great at UNLV, and I hope all of his stuff with the podcast goes well. For my 3rd round of day 1, I was playing up against Evan and his Dark Angels Gladius task force. And it was a bit of an offbeat list. I've seen Dark Angels Gladius before, but this was not the kind of list I'm used to seeing. He had Azrael, the solo lieutenant with combi weapon, 3 units of Assault Intercessors with jump packs, only 2 units of Deathwing Knights, 1 unit of Inner Circle Companions that was joined to Azrael, 3 Invader ATVs, the cheap moon buggies, 2 Repulsor Executioners, 2 Scout Squads, and a Calidus Assassin. We played this one on the same terrain that I played up against Kit, but this time our mission was Search and Destroy, Adapt or Die, and Take and Hold. And Adapt or Die, if you're not familiar, says that twice per game you can discard a card and redraw for free. Or if you're playing fixed, at some point during the game, you can choose to change one of your fixed objectives to another fixed objective. This game started off going pretty well for me, and then went terribly almost immediately afterwards. So Evan started off with his unit of Inner Circle Companions somewhere in here. He had a unit of Deathwing Knights. He had 1 Repulsor Executioner here, and I think the other one started around here. And this was the core of what he was trying to fight me with at the beginning of the game. I ended up going first in this one, and so I put a Scout Sentinel somewhere around here. I put out a LR Vanquisher somewhere here with the idea that he could draw a line of sight on it, but I couldn't really prevent that. Like, if he wanted to shoot at some of my tanks, he was going to get to, so I wanted to choose which ones he could actually have access to. I started my unit of Krieg somewhere in here. I put a Hellhound somewhere, I think it was like right about here. And I just took some board presence early on, and the game seemed like it was going to go okay. I'd set myself up such that if he wanted to bring his units out, he was going to have to put them somewhere out in the open, and it would probably be alright. And then in the bottom of 1, Evan decided that he was going to go into Assault Doctrine, where his entire army was going to have access to Advance and Charge. And I was thinking, okay, that's probably fine. Like, he's going to kill something here, he's going to kill something there, it's going to be fairly small, and then I'm probably just going to kill him back. And then he started rolling his advances. And these Inner Circle Companions, I think it was a 5. It might have been a 6, but it was at least a 5 in the advances. So they ended up right around here, and they were going to be able to charge into my Death Korps of Krieg, which I wasn't that concerned about, to be entirely honest. I thought I would probably, or I had like an okay chance of surviving. But the other thing that happened was the unit of Deathwing Knights that were over here, when they went, they also rolled. I know this one was a 5, but the Deathwing Knights, it meant that they actually rolled a large enough advance that they ended up somewhere in here, and they actually had access to like charging my Hellhound on relatively short charges. I think he was looking at like a 6-inch charge after rolling a 6 on his, or a 5 on his advance. This Rep-X came out over here, such that I could see the Vanquisher. This one came out here, somewhere in here, such that I think you could see the Hellhound. And he also put an ATV here, such that I could take a look at the Scout Sentinel. And I was feeling a little bit nervous after seeing these big advances, but a lot of my issues were, in my head, solved fairly quickly when this Repex over here shot and it did like two. I think it did 2 damage to this Lehman Russ. This one popped out over here, and I think it did like. I think it actually did nothing to his Hellhound, right? He just completely whiffed all of his shooting. The ATV also shot at the Scout Sentinel, and he also missed that one. His entire shooting phase was a whiff. But then his charges started going off. The Inner Circle Companions crashed into the Krieg line here. The Deathwing Knights went directly into the Hellhound here as well. And I think I had another like Vanquisher here that he was also able to touch. So the Deathwing Knights like also tagged this. And I also had a Taurox that I think was doing recover assets down here that he took a unit of JPIs from around here and was also able to charge into this Taurox. And I thought, okay, this is not ideal. I have one Lehman Russ that is in combat here. This Hellhound, I believe, lived on 1 wound, I believe. Um, but I have like a Dorn, I have another Lehman Russ. I have like another Lehman Russ. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I brought the Lehman Russ battle tank out here as well. So I was pretty confident that I could probably pick up the Inner Circle Companions here. I could probably, make the Deathwing Knights ineffective. And then from there, I could fight my way back onto the board, and I would be able to win because I had more stuff later on. The problem was my rolling for shooting was almost as bad as Evan's rolling for shooting in his first turn. I tried to, in my experience, when I'm shooting at the Inner Circle Companions, it's going to take 1.5 to 2.5 Lehman Russes to kill an entire break of Inner Circle Companions, and maybe Azrael will be alive at the end of it. That's not what happened. I shot an Exterminator, which was around here, Vanquisher with plasma cannons, another Vanquisher, all into the Inner Circle Companions, and they just were fine. They were absolutely chilling. So it had not only taken me an extra Lehman Russ to start shooting at them, but it also meant that I needed to put the Rogal Dorn into them. And then I barely killed them. And I'm sure you guys can already kind of see the issue from this position. If it takes my entire army to kill the Inner Circle Companions, these Deathwing Knights over here are just chilling. They're having a great time. He had also Rapid Ingress, I think. Where are the other Deathwing Knights? I think the other unit of Deathwing Knights, like he found a pocket like somewhere in here where I couldn't see him. But they were also ready to just go for a 5-inch move into a charge immediately after. And that's exactly what happened. Because it took so much of my army to actually deal with the Inner Circle Companions, this unit of Deathwing Knights were fine. This unit of Deathwing Knights were now on my doorstep as well. And because I had not killed enough, I was not going to be able to get out onto the rest of the board in time. It meant that even though I was in a position where if he killed nothing, I would still have most of my army, the problem is that most of my army was still going to be in my deployment zone right off the bat. And it was interesting talking to him early on as well. We agreed that I made some small mechanical misplays over here. I believe was on turn 2, where I might have been able to get a turn 3 15 points of primary, but I had a Taurox that was hanging out here, and then part of a Cadian command squad that was in combat with some JPIs. I'm probably supposed to leave them in combat to force my opponent to put more things on this objective, to force my opponent to deal with the Taurox that was hiding behind the wall. But I think we also both agreed afterwards that when he took his unit of Inner Circle Companions here and just charged them in, he needed to roll some dice, right? He rolled a big advance. He rolled a charge that got in. He got enough models in to kill the entire unit of Krieg. And then also the Deathwing Knights over here with their advance and charge also hitting the 5-inch advance into a charge suddenly meant that he was holding me back into my deployment zone really aggressively. And I found that I had a very similar game up against Alejandro at my last RTT, but I feel like This was definitely a game where my opponent took a gamble. It paid off very well. Ended up winning the entire event as well. So I can't feel too bad losing those kind of games to very strong players. So after that, we go out to dinner. I hang out with everybody. We go to a place called Cornish Pasties, which has some of the fantastic. I mean, I've heard them called pasties, but they were like basically like imagine like a chicken pot pie or just kind of like a pot pie that you just like folded over on itself, and now it's kind of like a giant hot pocket. It was delicious. We went out there, we hung out a bunch, and then I came back for my round 4 where I was playing up against Arthur. And so just a little bit more context, Kit Smith is a Team USA Academy member. Evan Stump was ranked 62 in the world globally at the time based on StatCheck Elo, and Arthur too has been a coach for Team USA for a while. And man, Arthur, I could tell he really understood the game. But let's go ahead and talk about his list. He was playing CSM and Renegade Raiders with a bit of an archetype of list that I haven't seen in a while. It was 1, 2, 3 Dark Communes, 2 Cultist Mobs, 3 units of Accursed Cultists, 3 units of Chaos Bikers, 1 Predator Destructor, 2 Vindicators, a unit of 10 Warp Talons, and a unit of 6 Nurglings. If you haven't played against Accursed Cultists before, if it's been a while since you played against them, let's remind everybody what they can do. Once per game, the Dark Commune, the character they're attached to, says that in the command phase, they are eligible to advance and charge, and they have +1 hit and +1 to wound for this turn. Also, Accursed Cultists can Blood Surge. Every single time you shoot at them at the end of the activation, they can make a D6-inch move where the unit has to end closer to the closest enemy unit, but the rest of their models get to free move as long as the unit has moved closer. This ends up playing a really big part in the game. So in this one, Arthur and I were playing on Tipping Point, Hidden Supplies, Burden of Trust. And one of the things that's different about Hidden Supplies on Tipping Point versus most of the different deployment zones you play on is that it is not guaranteed which direction the objective splits into. Because Hidden Supply says that when the objective splits, it goes towards a corner that No Man's Land is touching the corner for. But in this one, Hidden Supplies, or Tipping Point, does not have any corners that No Man's Land is touching. So, you can either split them this way, or you can split them this way. If they split towards your home objectives, you end up having a couple of objectives here that are basically just out in the open. They're incredibly easy to shoot, and you can't really stand on them safely basically at all. However, because of this U being a little bit bigger, like I mentioned, it was very easy for me to put like units of Krieg, put like 2 guys out on this objective, and continue to res guys, such that my opponent had to get all the way over here in order to control it. However, they split the other direction. You end up having objectives something like this, where you have this spot in the back where you can just stand completely safely. And it's also a fantastic staging position as well. And I knew if they split such that the objectives are in the open, it would give me a big advantage against melee armies. If they split in the other direction, melee armies would have a pretty big advantage against me because it is very hard for me to take them off of this middle objective, and it's relatively easy for them to take me off of my extra objective. But the most crucial turn in the entire game was probably my top of 3. Because in top of 2, when I went first, which is always bad on Burden of Trust, I had put a Taurox right about here. And this Taurox, the job of this Taurox was that I had put more OC on this objective such that my opponent would not score on that turn. However, Arthur is a good player. And Arthur decided that this was the mistake that he needed in order to push an advantage. And at this point, Arthur had like a unit of Accursed Cultists somewhere in here, and the other one here. What Arthur managed to pull off was honestly a really cool understanding of how the game works. I had put, I think it was like a Scout Sentinel somewhere in here, but what Arthur was able to do was this unit came out and was going to charge this. And he was going to use the fact that Renegade Raiders has a move at the end of the fight phase in order to take a couple of models from here and put enough OC onto this objective so that I would not score it. But overall, at the end of the fight phase, this unit was going to stretch out something like this, such that if I shot it at all, it could Blood Surge into the Taurox. This unit moved this way to be something like like this were the same thing. If I shot at it at all, it could blood surge into the Taurox. And then the last unit, this one came out, and it was a bit more like this. And the models in this unit and this unit were like intertwined such that he could blood surge into the Taurox. But the really crucial thing is none of these units had touched the Taurox at all. They were all up like an inch away because you can choose whether or not you're trying to consolidate a model. You can choose whether or not you're piling in a model. And this put a really big onus on me in order to try and deal with this massive problem. And the way that I tried to deal with this, I'm not sure was the best way for me to actually have tackled it, but it's the way that I thought was going to give me the best chance. I knew I was going to have one activation into each one of these units of Accursed Cultists. I wanted them to be 1, the Exterminator with the plasma cannons, 2, the Rogal Dorn commander, and the third one was going to be my Cadian command squad with Ursula Creed and the Cadian command squad, or in the 20 Cadians. The Rogal Dorn over here did a lot of damage. It actually almost wiped this ACDC squad. The Exterminator with plasma cannons came out here, and it did some decent damage to this, but I think I killed all the small ones, and I killed all the big ones out of this unit. It was only the small ones who were still alive here. The Cadian unit hopped out this way to be here in order to shoot into this unit. And this did, I think it killed like all the small ones. It actually did less damage than I was expecting it to, especially considering how many shots I was actually going to have to shoot at this unit. I realize now that something I probably could have done, this is probably another opportunity to use the coordinated action, such that I could use the take aim, and then first rank fire, second rank fire, and trade like this, such that it doesn't really help out the Exterminator that much. I get like an extra autocannon shot, an extra stubber shot, which is cool, I guess. But it would have made all of these Cadians down here hitting on 3s instead of on 4s, which is, a decent damage upgrade from where I was already at. I think it actually would have made a lot of my plasma hit. So that's something that I probably could have done in order to do more damage. But the problem was I killed like all of the big, and then this one killed like all the small, which meant that this unit here was still combat effective. It was able to run through my Cadians, and then it was also able to create problems on my home objective. And because of that, even though I scored decently well on primary on turns 2, 3, and 4, I got a 10, 6, and 8, respectively. It meant that on my turn 5, I ended up scoring only a 4 on Burden of Trust, which is really, really brutal because Arthur ended up scoring, even though he only scored a 2, he only scored guarding his home on turn 2, he's able to score an 8, 12, 12. And on Burden of Trust, where so much of the game comes down to how much primary you can control, it ends up being a really big deal. And it ends up being just enough that the official score we recorded was he scored 73 and I only scored 72. What Arthur said I probably should have done is, instead of putting the Taurox here, if this had been a unit of Catachan, such that they can, on such small bases, they can potentially find different ways to like get out because the Taurox could not go through this wall. He said that I probably could have gotten away with Catachan in ways that I could not have with the Tauroxes in order to make his blood surgers less effective. But in general, the other thing is he really wanted me to take he thinks it would have been better if I had like taken my Catachan and just blocked this off really early in the game, because he was really worried that he did not want to give up his Vindicators and Predators in order to kill these units, where I thought he would gladly trade away these units to kill my infantry if it meant that his Accursed Cultists could still get towards my tank line. Either way, though, the game ended up being incredibly close. I had a fantastic time, and Arthur is a great opponent. So far, my only losses in this event have been to Evan, who ends up going on to win the event, and Arthur, one of the coaches for Team USA. So I feel like I've done pretty good overall. For my 5th game, I ended up playing a Guard Mirror, but this time I was playing up against Timothy and his Hammer the Emperor. Tim was playing a bit of an offbeat Hammer the Emperor list. Started off with a Cadian Castellan, Gonskos, a Ministorum Priest, which he just used for objectives, 3 Rogal Dorn commanders, 1 with the reroll 1s, 1 with the 6 of Feel No Pain, 1 Tech Priest Engine Seer, 2 artillery teams with siege cannons, 2 Hellhounds with Inferno Multi-Melta, 1 Demolisher, 1 Exterminator, 1 unit of Aquilons. Now, I took one look at this list and thought, I'm pretty favored here. The fact that I have lethal hits is pretty awesome. The fact that I have way stronger mid-board play is pretty cool. So I should not only be able to trade up against all of his vehicles, I should also be able to just control the middle of the board much more effectively because I have a lot more OC and I have a lot more things. I didn't know at the time that this was going to be my biggest win of the event. So Tim and I played this one on Crucible of Battle, Adapt or Die, and Linchpin. So hold your home, hold no man's land for more points. And Adapt or Die, discard cards in order to redraw into better secondaries. I ended up going second on Linchpin, which was really good, but I also think Tim got really baited by the cards that he drew at the very beginning of the game. Tim ended up deploying like a Rogal Dorn commander here, and I think the Lehman Russ Demolisher was right behind it. Rogal Dorn here, and then Hellhound was like also. It was a little bit oddly positioned, I thought, whereas like here-ish. And then you had his Exterminator that was just hanging around back here. I had deployed a Taurox intentionally out in the open, such that if he chose to shoot at it, I was going to have not just one, but two Vanquishers hanging out behind, ready to go. My Exterminator was in the exact same spot. My Rogal Dorn was more defensively positioned than his was. I had my Hellhound in here, a Vanquisher here, or also like a Taurox somewhere in here. And what happened is this game basically ended in the bottom of one because Tim took this Rogal Dorn and he drew Cleanse, and he ended up putting the Rogal Dorn something like this, where it was on the objective and he could Cleanse. Then, like, he gave his entire army move, except for the two like siege cannons that were hanging out back here. Then the Demolisher auto-advanced and also touched on this objective. Hellhound wasn't able to get here without an advance, but I think it ended up like somewhere in here, Rogal Dorn, and then like Rogal Dorn, something like this. And what Tim decided to do was he spent his only CP here in order to get this Demolisher to shoot at my Rogal Dorn commander. And of course, I pop smoke because he is moved it. He is now hitting on 5s going up against my Rogal Dorn. And he shoots everything there, and I don't think he does any damage. I think he does 0. But he rolled a lot of 1s. I think he rolled a 1 on the number of shots. I think he just whiffed. I don't think he hit a single melta shot, so I don't even think he got to roll the wound with them. But as soon as I see his entire army come out, I look at this and think, awesome. The game is over from this position. I'm going to kill everything that is out here, and then I'm going to have whatever else to do. He has collapsed his own flank. The one other interesting thing that happens before this, as I go into my turn, and on turn 1, I draw Bring It Down and Area Denial. I take my Scout Sentinel, and I put it here, and this Rogal Dorn, I made sure that I could see the Rogal Dorn. He overwatches it, and just kills it outright on the overwatch. I'm like, okay, cool, I guess, my bad. But that meant that this Taurox had to roll at least a 3 in order to get into area denial range, and it did. But I had also gotten the guys out here. They moved out this way, and it meant that I had an 8-inch charge to wherever the Rogal Dorn was. Yeah, it must have been like around here. I set up both of these Vanquishers moving this way such that they could see the Hellhound. My Rogal Dorn moved just a little bit further forward so that I could see this Rogal Dorn. Vanquisher came out such that it could shoot at the Demolisher. Hellhound came out over here. And this one actually didn't move. This one just chilled. But my plan at the time was that I was going to try and kill this one outright. And then the Hellhound that was here would end up charging here and tank shocking it because the Rogal Dorn tank commander was probably going to be pretty low at this point. And then the Lehman Vanquisher that was also over here maybe could also go for a long charge if I needed to. That's not what ended up happening. These two Vanquishers handily killed this. I actually missed the first Vanquisher cannon, and I rolled like a 1, so I think I did like 7 damage on the next Vanquisher shot. But the multi-meltas that I also had end up being enough to finish off the Hellhound. This Vanquisher did a ton of damage to the Demolisher. The Hellhound stripped the cover of the Rogal Dorn commander, and then my Rogal Dorn commander shot at his. And I rolled 3 hits and a lethal hit. I rolled 2 of those into wounds, and then I used the built-in wound reroll to turn that one into another wound. So I had made 4 melta attacks, and I had gotten 4 melta wounds, and I was ignoring cover against this target because the Hellhound had already shot at it. And then Tim rolls 0 saves. And then I take my 4 dice and roll them, and I roll 20 damage. A 6, 2 5s, and a 4 for damage. Tim was not happy. Tim was not happy about that one at all. He did end up keeping it alive for a moment with the feel no pains, but I still had the rest of the Dorn left to still shoot at his Rogal Dorn. And so I ended up killing both of these tanks over here, and I killed the Hellhound. And then the last thing is that these Catachan who came out, they made their 8-inch charge into this tank, but it also meant that I was able to kind of swing around this way in order to tag both of these tanks. So I had not only gotten 8 points of Bring It Down, but I had killed 600 points of my opponent's army in the bottom of turn 1, and I had tagged one of his Rogal Dorn commanders here, such that it couldn't really move. It couldn't really do anything. Yes, he can spend a CP to fall back and shoot it over here, but without lethal hits, without anything to really shoot at, he's going to be shooting long range at, like, a Vanquisher. Cool. When Tim drew Bring It Down, he also drew Sabotage, and the only thing that he was able to kill for Bring It Down was I had my Taurox here in the middle, and I think it was this Rogal Dorn was able to move up and shoot it and killed it, or maybe it was like the Exterminator that came out like this way. But either way, like he was not scoring very well, and then when we get over to my turn, I'm able to bring in a Lebenrus battle tank over here. All these tanks work together. I kill this Rogal Dorn commander, and I kill this Exterminator. So by the time Tim is going into his turn 3, he has like a Rogal Dorn commander, an Engine Seer, 2 Siege Guns, a Castellan. Gaunt's Ghost are hanging out somewhere in here. He's got a unit of Aquilons that he had just that's still in reserve, that ends up dropping here for behind enemy lines. He has his one like Minister and Priest that is able to like find this very small spot because it's on because it's on like a 28 or a 32 back here. But that is all he has in his army. And we agree that after he scores his behind enemy lines for 4, tries to kill something for assassination, we just call it at that point because we know this is going to be dead. This is going to be dead. If he had wanted to bring his Rogal Dorn commander out at all, it was also going to die, simply because I had basically my entire army still to shoot at it. And so all he was going to have left was like Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Siege Cannons, and the Cadian Castellan. But yeah, this game was mostly just Tim was really aggressive on top of 1, but he was only aggressive with like half of his army. I think if Tim wanted to put the Rogal Dorn and the Demolisher here, he needed to also take like this Rogal Dorn commander, and it needed to just advance and touch this. And then this Rogal Dorn commander over here also needed to like advance and touch this. Like if he was going to do this, he needed to start his entire armor line, armor core on the board, and it all needed to come out all at once because I was able to isolate, everything that came out. And I wasn't really afraid of getting shot back because there wasn't a target saturation coming out. And so I ended up winning this one 98-33. The only reason why I didn't get 100 is because when I said that Hellhound that was like here, I was relying on it to actually make a charge to get onto this objective. I definitely could have put something there. Like I could have taken the Taurox that ended up just chilling here for a while. I could have taken the Catachan. They could have made it this objective. I could have scored those extra 2 points, but the bigger point is I got the win. For my last game of the day, I ended up playing up against Drew Johnson and his Leagues of Votann. And he was playing a very different list from what Kit was playing at the beginning of the tournament. I also have to say that Drew had one of the most gorgeous armies I've ever seen. He had put in a bunch of LEDs into, I think it was just his Hecaton land fortresses, but also they were just painted really, really well. The amount of detail he put into like all of his little banners and things was fantastic. But anyway, Let's go ahead and take a look at his list. He had a Brokir Ironmaster with the Grim Demeanor enhancement, a 9-year champion, 2 units of 10 Hearthguard Warriors that were split into smaller things with Sagittars, 3 Sagittars. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is, I don't know what the other option is called, but he chose not to take the Casino Guns. So he just had the missile launchers. He had 1 unit of 6 Brokir Thunderkin, 1 unit of 3 Brokir Thunderkin, 1 unit of 5 Chthonian Berserks, 1 unit of 5 Einherjar Hearthguard, 2 Hecaton Land Fortresses, 1 unit of 3 Pioneers, 1 unit of 6 Pioneers, and then 1 unit of Jaegers. Drew and I played this one on Tipping Point, Smoke and Mirrors, and Take and Hold. And Smoke and Mirrors, of course, is the one where you can take something and put it into reserve. This game ended up being a very slow game. Drew decided pretty early on that what he wanted to do was he wanted to take this one slow and wait for me to overcommit first. And I was happy to say, well, I'm going second on Take and Hold. I just need to stop your primary from happening, and I will win the game on account of I'm going second. Drew had a Hecaton Land Fortress here. He ended up having the big unit of Thunderkin hanging out here. The other Hecaton started here, but then ended up hanging out here for a while. And as soon as Drew said that he was going to try and take this game a little bit slower, I was already of the opinion that, awesome, I think I've already won. Drew ended up making a play that reminded me a lot of what Tim was doing originally. I don't remember why all of this came out, but there ended up being a Sagittar here with the guys poking out, and then the 3 bikes, were something like this. And, oh, I remember why they were here. I had put a Hellhound, like, right here, and this was one of the 2 targets that he had double judged for the bonus command points if you can kill it. And he took these units out in order to try and kill this Hellhound. And he didn't. And so what this allowed me to do was I took enough of my assets. Again, the Rogal Dorn was kind of like hanging here. We had like a couple of tanks hanging here. And I was able to kill pretty much all of this and put the Cadian command squad hanging out towards the back of this objective. I also used a Scout Sentinel to just hang out on here. And then I disembarked Catachan to be on this objective as well. And so what I was able to do is I held him to a 5 going into his turn 2. Drew once again decided that he wanted to play a fairly slow game, but he was still able to kill Catachan, Scout Sentinel, but he was not able to kill the Ogryn Bodyguard and the Cadian Command Squad over here. And he was not able to put more OC, so I ended up scoring this one and this one, so I ended up getting a 10 on my turn 2. The other major thing that happened in this spot was Tim had put like a Sagittar and like a couple of Hearthguard Warriors here, but he didn't set anything up to shoot down this long alleyway. And so I ended up rapid ingressing a Legionnaires battle tank right in here such that it couldn't get shot. With the main goal being that after the Catachan had died, this Legion Rush was going to come out, it was going to kill the Hearthguard Warriors, and it would then tie the Sagittar on OC so that I would yet again deny him this objective. Drew actually had a really clutch AOC on these guys over here, such that I was not able to actually kill them. He ended up living with, I think it was 2 guys that he was able to then Insane Bravery and put 4 OC onto that point, so he was still able to get his 10 on turn 3. But again, we mostly just kind of looked at each other. I end up controlling this one. I controlled my home. I controlled this one, so I get another 10. But the real backbreaker is in turn 4, which ended up being our last turn of the game because we were playing a bit slow, was that I held Tim to only hold his home. He tried to take the Thunderkin out over this way, and yep, he ended up putting like 3 of them into the Cadian Command Squad, which still had the Ogryn Bodyguard, and he did like no damage, which was not super surprising to me, but was pretty surprising to him. But the big thing was I ended up still scoring my home and my natural, but he had killed 19 of the Death Corps of Krieg, and I had like 1 guy hanging out right here. Drew was not able to kill it. And the real backbreaker was that I still had my Insane Bravery. So when this guy rolled 3 on the number of guys he could bring back, and I suddenly had 4 models here, and I could use Duty and Honor, such that these 4 models were 12 OC, and I think he had like 2 OC over here and like 1 OC over here, so he would have 3 OC on this point. When suddenly my one guy for 2 OC was now 12 OC and getting my 15, so I held my natural and the middle on turn 4. That's where the game was pretty close to being like, okay, I don't think the Votann can win. And about halfway through this turn, as I start hearing the judges' calls like, hey, let's start wrapping up our games, I go over and I talk to Drew and say, hey, I currently showed the score. I'm currently up 63 to 61. I haven't scored my no prisoners yet. And if we were to play this game another turn, I don't think there's a way for him to overcome the fact that I'm going to score a 15 in the bottom of 5. Well, he initially said, I don't, that's not the score that I show. Let's make sure that our scores are the same. So we did. We realized that my score was the accurate one. And he goes, yeah, I agree. You're going to win this game, but let's go ahead and we can go ahead and call it here at the bottom of 4. And so I end up winning this one 68 to 61. And I think a big part of this is Drew not only, I think, had the wrong game plan, but he also got really unlucky. He ended up leaving Eliminar's Battle Tank over here on 1. There was like Eliminar's Vanquisher here on 2. This guy here with just 1 wound left. And the Hellhound that he came out over here, he ended up charging it with a unit of Chthonian Berserks at some point, and it also lived on 1. And this was one of his targets that he could try and kill for a bunch of the CP early on in the game, and he committed a lot of resources trying to take it down, and he didn't. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4 units at least that I remember him almost killing and just barely not throughout the course of this game. And that was really backbreaking, the fact that he was just leaving units on 1 or 2 wounds over and over again. But it's still a fun game. I loved his models. I loved playing against him. He ended up winning best overall, so highest combination of best painted and an actual placing in the tournament. But overall, I'm still pretty happy with how I did at this event. I ended up getting 5th out of 40 players, with my one loss to Evan, who ended up winning the event, and also, like I said, is a very strong player. My other loss was to Arthur. Ended up going 3-2, not playing a 6th round, but again, coach for Team USA, clearly a very experienced player, and I had a lot of fun playing both of them. All of my games, honestly, I had a lot of fun playing, and the one, like my round 5, where I just blew Tim out of the water, we ended up just calling it fairly early, and we went to go get a beer, so that was a good time as well. Overall, I do just want to say, once again, shout out to the Green Banner Event Company. Jason, Steven, Anthony, and Kicker. It was a fantastic time all together going out to all events, and I'm looking forward to going to another one. But that was the recap here for the USA Charity Cup. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.